So if you're new to yin, or if this is your first time doing a yin yoga practice, it's a very particular type of yoga. It's a lot different than a vinyasa flow or a hatha or a power class. Yin yoga is a slower pace, so we hold poses for much longer. Poses are going to be held between 1 minute up to 3 minutes, and it's designed to stretch very deeply, oftentimes very intense stretching for relieving a lot of stress and negative emotions and all that good stuff. So that's a yin practice. So tonight, hey Sarah, welcome. We're going to go ahead and start in Shavasana. So everybody can come to laying on their backs. And you can lay on your back just like I'm doing. Bring the eyes to close. The palms are face up with the arms about 45 degrees out each side. Just let the feet sway open naturally. Now, if you're like me, I have a lot of curvature in the lumbar spine, so you can also bend the knees to kind of flatten out the low back. But we're going to be starting in Shavasana today with the eyes closed. And since we're all coming to the mat after a holiday weekend, I thought we'd start this class tonight with just a little bit of breath work, just to get us centered and relaxed, because as you know, yin is a slower, more deeply stretching, holding intense poses type of practice. So finding your comfortable Shavasana, breathe in and make sure that the forehead is relaxed. On your next inhale, smile wide and then relax the jaw. And then just make sure your shoulders are spread flat across the back of the mat. And you guys can all be laying down now. I'm just sitting up to make sure that you can hear me well. So just go ahead and lay flat on the back. And again, your knees can be bent like mine if you have a curvature in your low back. So everyone is still laying on their back. I'm just sitting up so you guys can hear. And we're going to start with 4x4 breathing. This is a really simple yet very relaxing breathing technique in which we control the breath. So we'll inhale for a count of 4. We hold the breath at the top with the lungs full for a count of 4. Then we exhale for a count of 4, and then hold the breath at the bottom while the lungs are empty for a count of 4. So beginning with me, it goes a little like this. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Continue now on your own count. Job. Inhaling for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4. And as you continue this 4x4 breathing at your own pace, notice how it starts to relax you, brings you a little bit more into this practice and awareness here. I'm just going to explain a couple of the yin yoga principles that we're going to be doing in this class for folks who may be new to it. So as we said, yin yoga moves at a slower pace. The poses are held between 1 to 3 minutes. So the very first principle of yin yoga is finding your edge in the stretch. So we're going to be stretching deeply, and the edge is where you feel a stretch. The stretch is intense, even somewhat uncomfortable, but not painful. So dull, achy is okay, sharp, biting, anything painful, bad. And since we're not together, and even if we were, I would never know where your edge is, so it's up to you as the practicer to really respect that edge, find it on your own. It's much better not to be super sore tomorrow. So finding the edge is the first principle of yin. Now, if you strayed away from that 4x4 breathing, just come right back to it. And we'll move into the second principle of yin. And that principle is finding stillness in the pose. So for each pose, I'm going to give a couple of ways to get into it. For most of them, you find the option that's right for you. Once you do, you come to that edge, your safe edge, and then we commit to stillness in the pose. Continue your 4x4 breathing. The last principle of yin that we're working with tonight is the breath. The breath should be smooth and consistent, and the breath is what we use to gauge the intensity of the pose, and we use the breath as our mantra, inhaling and exhaling to find space in the pose. So beautiful work, guys. So now, laying in Shavasana, you can let the breath return to normal. And we're gonna bring the right leg bent, if it's not already, with the right foot flat on the floor, and we'll come to a figure 4. So the left ankle is gonna come on top of the right knee in a figure 4, or a reclined pigeon. And then we're just gonna take both hands and bring them behind the right thigh to start with a hip opening stretch. So we're finding a stretch in the left hip here. And remembering those principles of yin, we first find the intensity of the pose that is at our safe edge. And once we found that, we commit to staying in that pose. And then we focus our awareness very intently on the smooth breath. And you can breathe regularly now, no more need for the 4x4 breath. And we just sink into this pose. And you'll notice over time as we hold the pose, your edge may move, and you might be able to move into a deeper expression of the pose. Continue to follow the breath and see how deep you can sink into the stretch. You'll want to be feeling the stretch in your left hip socket. And now, leaving the legs just as they are, we'll release the bind behind the right thigh with the hands, and we'll bring the arms out to a T face down. And then we'll come into a supine twist by bringing the bottom of the right foot to the ground. Bringing the bottom of the left foot to the ground. So staying in our figure 4 here, we just twist the bottom half of our body over to the right, and the top of the left foot meets the ground. Now in this pose, it's important to note that your left hip should have come all the way off the mat, but your left shoulder should be down flat on the mat. So take a moment to adjust if you need to. We'll just rest here in the supine twist. See if you can follow the breath and stay in the awareness of this pose. Great job, everybody. And then if you haven't already, turn your head to the left to gaze at your left hand to complete the twist of the spinal column. So bottom half of the body is twisted to the right, and the head is twisted to the left. And it is not unusual to continue to have a hip stretch in that left hip in this position. On your next inhale, you're going to come out of the twist by bringing both knees into the chest and returning the back flat to the mat. Then you can give a little rock back and forth on the lumbar spine. And now we're going to set up for the figure four on the other side. So this time, the left knee is bent with the foot flat on the mat, and then the right ankle comes over the left knee. We can draw both legs close into us in a figure four and then grip behind the left thigh to find an opening in your right hip. Remembering in yin, we first find the edge of intensity for us, it's safe. Then we commit to that. And lastly, we spin the breath and our focus attention there in the stretch. Just a few more conscious breaths here. And on your next inhale, release the grip from behind the left thigh. And then exhale to let both legs fall over to the left side. Arms come out to a T. Supine twist here. The right hip has come completely off of the mat, but the right shoulder is flat to the mat. With the arms face down, and then lastly, we twist the neck to face towards the right. In yin yoga, we often say that the breath becomes the mantra. And that is that this practice is as much meditative as it is stretching the body. And so the breath becomes like a metronome and the focus of our meditation. So just let it go in and out, long and slow, calm and deep, smooth and soft, rising and falling, here and now. then on your next inhale, we'll come out of the twist, returning to a flat back with both knees pulled into the chest. We can circle the ankles. And then in your own way, at your own pace, come up to a seated position, and we'll all face the front in an easy seated position. So from here, we'll take Baddha Konasana or butterfly pose. So both knees are bent, and then the bottoms of the feet come together. Now, it's your choice how close you want the heels to the groin. You'll actually notice that it will stretch different areas of the inside of the hip socket depending on how far the heels are away from the groin. So take your choice. And then with a flat back, you can suck in to hollow out the belly and then come to bring the torso closer to the earth. You can grab onto both feet. You can use your elbows and your forearms to press the shins and the calves down if you'd like to get a little bit closer to your edge. And then find an edge that you can commit to for a few minutes here, and we'll sink in and reconnect with the breath. In and out, calm and slow, long and deep. Something that you might have heard other yoga teachers say is to send the breath to the area where you feel the stretch. That doesn't actually technically make sense, but something about the visual connection really helps me to get more deeply into the pose and to kind of tune the breath into the sensations that I'm feeling in the stretch. So we'll try that for the next couple minutes here. Now just bring the awareness back to the breath for the last couple breaths here. And then you can gently press your torso back up to a high seated position. From here, we're going to move into something called Rock the Baby. So we'll leave the right knee completely bent. We'll also bend the left knee at 90 degrees, but we're going to grab the outside of the left foot and pick it up with our left hand, and then we're going to place it in the crook of the right elbow. And then the left hand can wrap around, just like we're rocking a baby here. So a couple keys in this pose is we do not want the back rounded. We want the chest really high and proud and the back straight and tall. Now, if you like this, if this is working for you, just stay here and find your edge in this pose. I'm just going to show an option if you're not loving this. So that option would be to sit in Sukhasana, or what people call Indian style, with the left leg in the front. So that's the important part. And then with a flat back, hinge over, calm down, see if you can get some extension here and find another stretch in the left hip that way. You can also walk the fingertips over to the right to intensify the stretch in the left hip. So your choice, either rocking the baby here, and we'll sink it. Remember, first the edge, then commitment to stay, and then sending the breath in unison with the sensations of the stretch. So there's tons of jokes in the yoga community about people starting to cry during hip openers in class. And for some reason, just the sensation tends to bring out emotions. And we all joke about it a lot, but that's part of kind of the release. The essence of yin practice is that by, really making ourselves stay in some intense and sometimes uncomfortable situations helps us to release energy and emotions. And it kind of trains our mental fortitude for staying in tough and not so great situations in real life off the mat. So we'll be here just a little bit longer. If you're in rock the baby like me, something I'd love for you to try is to press the left foot into the right bicep and resist with the right bicep, creating some tension there, and notice how it opens up another dimension in the hip socket. Another thing that you can do is try to push the push the left toes up to the ceiling, but resist with the right bicep and see how that opens up another layer. And then wherever you are, you can gently come out of that pose, and we'll return to easy seated position. And then we'll just switch by bringing the right leg into the front, and you can go ahead and take your favorite expression of the same pose. We're just doing it on the right side. So you can either, with your right leg in front, bend over it, find some extension, or walk the fingertips to the left to get deep into the right hip socket. Or you can pick up and put the knife edge of the right foot into the crook of the left elbow, and then wrap the right arm around. Rock a little bit. The hip socket is so big, you can really find some play in there. If the mind wanders, as it will do, that's okay. Just bring it right back to the breath. Just moving a little deeper with every inhale and exhale. Just a few more conscious breaths here. And on your next exhale, you can make your way out of the pose. Here we'll work into a hamstring stretch by extending the right leg long, having the left leg bent at the knee, with the bottom of the left foot and the inside of the right thigh. And then always important to make sure that the back is flat, the low belly is sucked in, and we hinge forward at the waist with a flat back. The right foot is flexed, toes towards the ceiling. So there are technically three muscle areas of the hamstring. There's an inner, an outer, and a center. So if you can reach forward towards your toes, you can practice, grabbing towards the outside of your foot and how that feels different than grabbing towards the middle or the inside of your foot. Remembering to keep the breath like the waves of the ocean. On your next inhale, we'll raise up to a high seat and then just switch legs, coming into a stretch of the left hamstring, making sure that the chest is high and back is flat as we hinge. We don't want to round the back. When we round the back, there is an ability to reach further forward, but the form of the pose doesn't have as much integrity. And you'll notice that you'll get a much better stretch with the flat back. And then once you've met the edge, then the head can come down. And so as we explore deeper into, the meditative aspect of Yin Yoga, always comes back to the breath. So our one vocation here is to feel into the pose and then to simultaneously notice our own breath maybe more closely than we ever have before. So feel the air come in as it passes through your nostrils. Notice the quality of the expansion on the inhale and how that expansion affects the pose. Notice the fullness and the pause at the crest of the inhale. And then notice the sinking into peace as the air leaves the lungs on the exhale. And then that pause at the bottom before the next breath starts is the most quiet and peaceful place that the mind will ever reside. I like to appreciate that point and linger there in that peace and stillness as much as I can. If only I'd had that technique earlier in my life. Just a few more breaths with your focus intently on them. All right, rising back up to a tall seated position. You can bend that left knee back in. If you want to, you can try rolling over the shins like this to come into all fours, or you can just make your way there any which way possible. Feel free to take a sip of water. And you guys can continue to face to the front. I'm just going to turn to the side so that you can see me better. See what we're doing here. All right, so all fours. Wrists directly underneath shoulders. Knees directly underneath the hips. And from here, we're going to tuck the toes and send the hips up, back, and high into a downward facing dog. So we're going to be here for a little while. We're focusing on stretch in the calves as well as the hamstrings. So the first thing we want to do is broaden those shoulders to make sure that the shoulders aren't hunched up by the ears. You can also slowly pedal the feet. So bringing one heel down and the other. And then just to find your edge and deepen the stretch, we're just pressing the torso towards the quads. Sink into the breath and the stretch here. Now, you're perfectly fine to stay here if you like, but if you'd like to stretch the side body, we can raise the right leg up, back, and high, bend deeply into the right knee, and send the right hip to stack on top of the left. Deep side body stretch. And then we'll gently place the right foot back on the mat. On your next inhale, you can raise the left leg up, back, and high. Bend deeply into that left knee. Stack the left hip over the right. Then gently return the left leg down, coming back into a neutral down dog. And then we'll walk the hands backwards to meet the feet in a forward fold. So the feet can remain hip width distance apart. Suck in the low belly, and then we'll hang out here. Just remember, don't use the muscles of the neck to hold up the head. Let the head hang completely. You can grab opposite elbows and ragdoll, and then just gently shift your weight towards the balls of your feet to open up the hamstrings a bit more. Find your edge here, and then really focus on that breath meditation. You can gently release the fingertips back all the way to the floor. Then we'll just walk the hands back out a little bit. We'll bring the knees down and come back into all fours or tabletop position. Now from here, we're gonna go into what's known as heart melting pose or puppy pose. And this can be a very good spot to grab some yoga blocks or a pillow, because this is an intense back bend and heart opener. So I'm just gonna grab a couple things that I might need here. So what we're gonna do is set up from all fours. Now this pose is kind of like child's pose, except the hips stay up high where they are, and the hip stays directly on top of the knee. What we do is walk the hands forward, bringing the chest down to the ground, and there's a deep bend in the upper back. The forehead can come to the mat. If you're very flexible in the upper back, you can bring the chin to the mat or the forehead. Now, if that's too intense, this is where yoga blocks really help, or you can stack some pillows underneath the chest and then find the pose here. I like to bring the hands forward in prayer. That makes it a little bit more accessible for me. And then you can gently come up onto the palms of the hands and come out of that pose, returning to tabletop. So for me, that's an intense pose, and I can't say that I love that pose, but it is a great practice in staying and finding calm during something that is uncomfortable, at least for me. So from here, you guys stay where you are. I'm going to turn so you can see me. We're going to come into Malasana or Yogi Squat. So the hands can stay flat on the floor, and we're going to bring one foot up to the outside of our hands and the other foot up. So the stance is wide. The feet are on the outer corners of the mat in a squat. And the elbows, so your feet will be on the outer edges of the mat, and the feet are also splayed open at 45 degrees, just like mine are. We bend in the elbows, bring the hands to prayer, and let the elbows live in the crooks of the knees. Now, this is also a great spot for some pillows or blocks. This is a great spot where you could like stack up a block like this to help come into that pose wherever you are. But we're gonna hang out here. So find that edge, even if it's uncomfortable, and commit to sink in here. You might feel some burning in the quads. That's okay. We'll be here for just a few more breaths. So coming out of this pose, the hands can come flat to the mat, and then we can just return to an all fours back onto the knees. Great work, guys. We'll bring the toes to touch. The knees can come wide, and we'll all sink back into an easy child's pose for a few breaths. And then you can make your way back to a seated position, and we'll take a wide-legged pose here, coming into a wide-legged seated split. Great work, everybody. So coming into stretching the adductor muscles, or the inner parts of the thighs. You can set your stance however you like, and then preparing to bring your torso towards the ground. Just once again, make sure that you're not rounding in the back, that you're hinging at the waist. Find an edge that you can commit to. And then we'll sink into this pose, bringing back our breath awareness. If your mind has wandered off to your to-do list or many things we have to worry about, that's okay. Just bring it right back to following the breath, counting the breath as your own personal metronome. One of my favorite teachers refers to the moment that you realize that you've been thinking or drawn away from your practice as the magic moment. And she calls it the magic moment because a lot of times people get frustrated and they're like, oh no, I've been thinking about, planning my vacation this whole time instead of meditating. But it's a magic moment because the moment that we realized that we were doing that and that the mind was running us instead of us using the mind, that's the magic moment. That's breaking all of that conditioning and habit, and it brings us back to a point of awareness, which I think is really cool. So with that in mind, just a couple more breaths here. And then we'll just rise up back to a tall spine. And then with the legs continue to be spread, let's extend over to the right side. Bring the left arm overhead. And we're looking for a stretch here in the left low back. That muscle is the quadratus lumbaris. And this is a muscle that can often interfere from more, advanced yoga poses that you might want to do in a hatha or vinyasa class. So getting it good and stretched will open up a new range of poses for you. On a deep inhale, you can bring the torso all the way up and high, and then exhale to lean over to the other side. We'll rise up to a tall spine once more. We can bring the legs to close out and straight, and then we can set up to come back to the back. And we can pull the knees into the chest. And then from here, I'd like to invite us to take an inversion. So option one is to place some pillows or a yoga block under the sacrum, and then raise the legs up into waterfall, and the arms can be face down out to the side. And we can stay here. That's one option. Or if you don't have a block or pillows, it's fine. Just raise your legs up. So we can chill here if you're good. Just another option too is to come into shoulder stand. And if you want to come into shoulder stand, just remove the blocks and pillows, and then just send the hips back up and high overhead. The arms come to 90 degrees, bent elbows. We're not putting pressure on the neck here, all the neck. All the pressure is on the shoulders. Either way, find your pose, and we'll find some stillness here. And then we'll slowly and gently come down out of that pose. And whichever variation you're in, we'll bring the knees back into the chest. Both knees bent into the chest here. And then with the knees still bent, we'll send the soles of the feet up high to the sky. Coming into Happy Baby, we'll grab the outer edges of the feet. So the elbows are to the inside of the legs, but we're grabbing one to the outer edges. And then we're just going to gently pull the toes towards the head. And breathe into this here. You can slowly let the knees down and take a moment to set up for your most comfortable, perfect Shavasana. However you'd like to be. Legs can be long or they can be bent at the knees. Go ahead and lay down and do your final resting pose. And once again, with the CN practice, we commit back to the breath. So noticing as it rises and falls, checking the forehead, release tension there. Checking the jaw, releasing tension there. Feeling the weight of the shoulders sink into the ground. Feeling the weight of the hips and every single organ just sink down into the mat. And just connect with that breath for the last couple minutes of this practice here. I'd like to share with you guys a poem that I found that I thought was really lovely. And this is called The Invitation by Araya, the Mountain Dreamer. And her words say, "It does not interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting what your heart is longing for. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you'll risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, or for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what your zodiac sign is. I want to know if you've touched the center of your own sorrow, if you've been opened by life's betrayals, or if you've become shriveled and closed from fear of future pain. Can you sit with pain, mine or your own, without being moved to hide it, feed it, or fix it? I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own. If you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful or to be realistic or to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you could be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it's not pretty, every day. And if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failures, yours and mine, and stand on the edge of the lake and shout to the moon, yes. It doesn't interest me where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after a night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you've studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else fades away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the quiet moments of stillness. And so take a moment now to gently roll the wrists and the feet around. Maybe take a huge good morning stretch with the hands up high over the body. And then you can roll to one side, keeping the eyes closed, staying in the fetal position. And then continuing the process to push yourself up and make your way up to a seated pose with the hands in prayer at the heart, Anjali Mudra. And the eyes can stay closed. Thanks for practicing with me tonight. May the long-time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way on. Namaste.